everyone, and welcome to this Shop Talk episode of FP Next, powered by John Deere. I'm one of your co-hosts for this farmer and rancher-driven podcast, Sarah McNaughton Peterson, and I'm here with Kurt Arns.
Hi, Sarah. Yes, we're powered by John Deere. So for all of your equipment and technology needs, see your local Deere dealer. So Sarah, here we are in the kind of the dog days of winter is kind of the way I look at it. So I'm guessing that in the way winter has spread south this year, especially the snow, it's kind of weird. We don't have a whole lot of snow, but we were in single digits again this morning, and it's been typical midwinter weather, I guess. How about you guys?
It's been a true North Dakota winter so far. I know last week, negative 62 was the lowest temperature in the state with the wind chill, but we only got to negative 32 with the wind. And today it's in the single digits, so we're above zero. And we've been getting a lot of weather whiplash because one day it'll be insanely cold, and then the next day it's in like the mid to high 30s. So we've got coats and bibs and boots everywhere, but one person I know isn't dealing with the snow and the cold is our podcast guest today. She's a staff writer for Delta Farm Press, hailing from Northeast Arkansas. And so from being a public school teacher to working with University of Arkansas Cooperative Extension Service to now being at Delta Farm Press, Whitney Hagewood covers agriculture, including the Mid-South crops and beyond, and maybe a few things we don't hear about this far north, Kurt.
Yes, Whitney joined the Farm Progress team in 2022, and she writes about rice, cotton, sweet potatoes, and even more in the Mid-South, including the home state of the Super Bowl this year, Louisiana, where we're excited to have Whitney Hagewood to talk all about agriculture in the South. So, Whitney, we kind of alluded to you being warmer than us, but the way things have been, maybe that's not the case, huh?
Well, we had a little snow. Actually, we had a lot of snow, I don't know, a couple weeks ago. I went out and measured with my staple cotton ruler, and we had about 6 inches when I measured. That melted, and now we're just in, y'all say like negative degrees. I don't get that. 20 degrees is cold for me. I'm ready for it to warm up already. So, yeah, it's been around in the 20s here. For me, like the big thing was I thought my pipes were about to freeze at my house. So I guess you guys have different things to worry about up north, but yeah, we're cold here. Had some snow. The crazy thing though, talking about Louisiana, is the snow in New Orleans right now. That's very interesting. Have you seen the pictures? It's it's beautiful. I just don't think they're used to that.
Yeah, I saw a video of someone playing hockey on one of the streets in New Orleans the other day, and I thought that was pretty fun. So very interesting.
Yeah, snow in the French Quarter is really pretty to see, but an unlikely sight down here. So
I know we always talk about how cold it is up here, but we're used to it. We have all the snow plows, we have the infrastructure, and I feel like it's a lot different, snow and 20 degrees down your neck of the woods and snow and 20 degrees up here, when we're down in those negative 60s. It's too cold to even snow half the time. But we got a lot of exciting stuff to cover today. And so the first question I got for you, Whitney, is, of course, the Super Bowl in Louisiana is right around the corner, happening the beginning of February. But who are you supporting for the Super Bowl, even if they're already out? Because I know a couple of my teams that I really wanted to make the Super Bowl already lost out of the playoffs. But so we record this episode before the weekend games. And so it's the Bills and the Commanders, the Chiefs, and the Eagles. So it's
okay.
going to be out of those four teams.
I don't know. I'm going the Chiefs just because I'm a Taylor Swift.
Kurt, I don't know about you, but when it comes to the Super Bowl this year, I was very anyone but the Chiefs. I think it'd be great for the Commanders since they haven't made it that far, and same for the Bills. And, the Eagles I like because of the Jason and Kylie Kelsey, even though he's not even playing. So, Kurt, who are you going for?
Hey, we're Vikings fans here. So as our friend Kevin Schultz always tells us at the Farmer, the Vikings, they get us all hyped up thinking we're going to go a long ways. And then we hit the playoffs and boom, our hearts just sink. And true to form this year, they did that to us. But this year, even though we're still got a little bit of playoffs left, I really have been kind of supporting the Bills just because we've got a neighbor who is actually from Buffalo. And so I've enjoyed watching them play, and a good cold weather team too. So
Definitely. And I know the Chiefs have worked hard to get to their Super Bowl in the last year. So I don't want anyone to think that I'm just hating on them, but I would like to see some different teams playing this year. But speaking of the Super Bowl and kind of all these game day football games we've been watching, or Kurt, we've been watching a lot because of our fantasy football team that we just finished up with. Whitney, what's kind of your favorite Super Bowl or game day snack when you're like watching the game, or even if you're just hanging out on kind of one of those chilly Sundays?
It's got to be buffalo chicken dip. It is cream cheese based, buffalo sauce with chicken. You can't go wrong with that. It's a hit every time.
And we were doing a little bit of research, just thinking about how much of the buffalo chicken wings are consumed in our country on Super Bowl Sunday. And I was just thinking about some other food too, but we had like 14,500 tons of chips and 3.8 million pounds of popcorn. I had to get that right. 320 here, Sarah, this one's for us. 325 million gallons of beer. How about that one? And so some of these
Yes,
are
I'll take
just
it. We grow the rice for that.
right, exactly. And then cheese because you talk about pizza and it's involved in everything. 8.8 million pounds of cheese. So our dairy person Fran O'Leary up in Wisconsin would love that one. So it's just almost amazing to think about the amount of food consumed on that day. But yeah, I like the chicken wings. We do pizza usually on Super Bowl Sunday. So how about you, Sarah?
So lately, I've just either been looking up recipe ideas on TikTok and kind of experimenting and planning stuff out. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It is usually chicken and meat based, and usually some chips and stuff. But yes, the food is a huge part of the Super Bowl. I know a lot of people do takeout or delivery, and some people cook. And Super Bowl Sunday is actually the second largest day of food consumption in the US, only following Thanksgiving. And a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about today makes sense with that. And of course, ag is a huge part of that. But Whitney, turning a little bit, tell us a little bit about your town you live in and kind of your local food joint you love around there. And just a little bit about what life is like down in Arkansas for you.
I live in rural America. It's um, all farm country, row crops as far as the eye can see, except for the local gas station. And, the only place we really have to eat here is the local Mexican place. So it's an amazing place, actually, though. Even though it's small, it's such a great community. And I've learned that with all the other small communities that are around us because ag's what holds us together. So it's a beautiful place, little bitty. Um, I can't tell you a favorite restaurant other than Mi Pueblito, which is right down from my mama's hair salon where she does hair, where she's done it since in third grade. Absolutely wonderful. I love our farmers here. They are very committed to what they do, and not just here in my little town, but in all the little towns around me. Ag is our number one industry in the state of Arkansas.
Could you please tell us just a little bit about some of the challenges that farmers, because you cover a pretty wide region and a lot of different crops, what are some of the challenges that farmers are facing going into 2025 in your neck of the woods?
I think beyond my landscape, but just all of the farmers across the nation, and particularly here, are going into a very critical time economic wise farming in 2025. And not just the farmers, but also the bankers who need to know that money is coming in. We need a farm bill. We need it big. We need economic assistance. We need it large. And we need it now. And we don't have it yet. So we're waiting on that to be delivered. The other day I was driving, my closest big town is 45 minutes from me. So it's Jonesboro. And I'm driving to Jonesboro and I see my first for sale sign in a field. That was hard to see. And the uncertainty going into 2025 for our farmers and the fact that they may not have retroactive help, that's really scary. Not kind of scary, it's very scary for them. So you can have one or two bad years, make it 3 bad years, and it's hard. But we're rocking on a series of bad years here, and we need some help. We need a bailout fast.
So we were talking with Shelly Hughley, who's also with Farm Press. She had shared a little bit about just how bad the drought had gotten down in her neck of the woods. And of course, it's a little ways from you still, but have you guys been working with drought? Have you had enough rain? Kind of have the weather conditions been at least helping farmers out during these difficult times?
Our drought situation, I believe, has gotten a little better. Still not the best. Um, I'd have to look at the drought monitor to tell you exactly where we are right now. I know a couple years ago it was pretty bad, but it's gotten better since.
I was going to ask you a little bit about some of the area that you cover, but also have you had a couple favorite stories that you've done, because you do cover a pretty wide region, all kinds of crops. Can you tell us, maybe share with our listeners a story or two that you've written in, recent months that really resonated with you?
You betcha. In recent months, like back in October, and actually I met these guys over the summer, we had this great tour that came to Arkansas. And I got to meet this family. They're actually two families, and they're neighbor farmers. And they have partnership together. They have a partnership together to boost their efficiency. And so it's called Holt House and Center. They're very ag tech oriented. They share grain bin space. They keep records of everything that comes in and goes out of the grain bin. They're very, very well aware of who owns what, and but at the end of the day, um, they're two multi generational farms who work together to to boost their efficiency and better data capture. One has a cotton gin, and then the other has more grain storage, and they work together beautifully. That was one of my favorite stories. Another one was when I learned about rice milling. I didn't know what rice milling took. Even being from the biggest rice producing state in America, I didn't know exactly what milling did or what it looked like. But Nutrien did this amazing demonstration, and it was actually Scott Greenwald. He's their agronomist, and he showed us exactly what happens to rice as it goes through the milling process. And to see it go from being in the husk to coming out as white rice and measuring it, that was really amazing. And it also gives you a good idea of quality. And that's another question that you asked about our farmers earlier. I have a very good friend of mine who had the best rice yields he's ever had this year. But when he took his rice to deliver and he sold it, he got his biggest deductions. And reference prices don't trigger on that. And so when you ask about what farmers have going into 2025, it's things like that. It's quality. Quality matters. And so it was very interesting to see how rice is marketable based on milling, but it's very interesting to hear it from my farmer's perspective.
I know it's I have no idea what the rice industry looks like. And it's kind of like sugar beets up here. It's like, those specialty crops that each region kind of has. What would you say is kind of the biggest crop down there? I know you've covered everything like we mentioned, from rice to cotton to sugar beets, rice to cotton to sweet potatoes, and of course soybeans and some of the regular row crops. What's kind of the king crop down in your area?
In my area, honestly, it's rice. We're the number one rice producing state. And actually, I live in the county where we had the number one rice production last year. So that's pretty cool. But on the other side of the state, not where we are, the landscape is very different. And so you don't have as many row crops over on the northwest side of the state, but you have more broilers and you have more cattle. So they're heavy in chicken production and beef production and that kind of thing. What I've learned is that my side of the state helps feed that side of the state so that we can all work together and feed the whole country. It's beautiful how it comes together. Also, you probably don't know this little fun fact, but you said that this is the second largest day that Americans eat other than like Thanksgiving. If at Thanksgiving, if you eat a whole butterball turkey, you buy the whole butterball turkey and you put it in your oven and you bake it. It came from Arkansas.
So your state is constantly contributing to these big festivities and holidays, right? So I mean, that's the bottom line for
Definitely,
sure.
right? Right. So it's a very cool state to live in.
Tell us a little bit. Your background is in education. Tell us a little bit about how you came into Farm Press and what where you grew up and a little bit about your backstory.
You betcha. So I've always lived in this little small town in Newport. Still live in the same small town I grew up in, raising my girls here. So it's amazing. I actually went to school or to college to be a teacher, and I taught for 4.5 years. Then decided to step away from the classroom and step away from a career completely to stay home and raise my girls. And I raised them at home for 8 years. And after that, and I was ag adjacent the entire time. I was in an ag family. I was a farm wife, and so very well aware of agriculture, but didn't really understand the nitty gritty stuff to it. And then in 2019, I decided it was time for me to go back to work. And I found a part time job at the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture with cotton agronomist Bill Robertson. And Bill Robertson taught me more about agriculture than I ever knew, and he did it in a year and a half. And so I worked with Bill for a year and a half, and then I moved up to technical and social media writer. I worked for Dr. Vic Ford, still at the university. And in that time, I was trying to write things, and I did not know if farmers wanted to be called farmers, growers, or producers. So I put out a poll on Twitter. Do you prefer to be a farmer, grower, or producer? And out of 96 people that responded, 76% said farmer, which I thought was very interesting. And so did my extension family because they had been taught to call them something else, call them a grower or a producer. I was really proud that they were farmers and, or that they wanted to be called farmers. And Ginger Rousey, I don't know if you remember her, but she used to write for Delta Farm Press. She was actually kind of in my position before I came here. And Ginger picked that story up off Twitter. She wrote a story about me. And the next thing I know, Ginger sends me an email and says, "Hey, we got an open position. I think you'd be great for it." And the next thing I know, I'm writing for Delta Farm Press, and I've loved every day of it since.
But that is such a funny story, especially talking about the farmers, growers, producers. We talk about that. I know I've done a Twitter poll of, do you farm? And for the people who like have row crops and have cattle, would they rather be called a rancher who farms or a farmer who ranches? And that was a very interesting discussion because I think a lot of it, depends on the region and what side of the state they were on. But Kurt, what do you usually go for?
Well, when I'm writing, I use all three, but I do think, and I've heard this before at other polls, and there's been some studies what farmers prefer to be called, and most farmers prefer to be called farmers, and so that I think it kind of rings true to your what you found out too. Although in our country, just like Sarah was saying, there are producers who prefer to be called farmers, and others prefer to be called ranchers, and so there is some distinction there. But certainly, those farmer and rancher names seem to stick a little bit more than producer or grower or some of the other, terms we might use. But we got to mix it up a little bit to make it readable in our magazines for sure.
And you don't think about it, and I think some consumers don't think about it this way, but when you start buying those things that you're going to go buy for Super Bowl, whether, you're going to go buy that beef or whatever, it started a year, 2 years ago when they started growing, or maintaining that livestock or that crop. I mean, this isn't something that just turns over in a day. They have There was a lot of thought that went in to putting that on the shelf for you to buy at the supermarket. And it took more than 1 year, maybe two, to raise that. It's a bigger world than I think some of our consumers are very aware of.
Absolutely. And I know it's especially would take a long time because some of these stats that we found from Farm Bureau is there are 14 billion hamburgers served on Super Bowl Sunday. It's a lot of beef. 12 million pounds of bacon, a lot of pigs. 1.45 billion chicken wings. Sounds like a lot of those come from Arkansas too, Whitney. And 51.7 million cases of beer. And of course, one bushel of barley will make around 500 12-ounce beers. But I didn't look up the rice stats because I always think about no barley, no beer. And I got to remember the rice ones coming up. With all of that, I think it's just so great that we're able to like come have a fun day, watch some football, whether your team is in it or not, and just enjoy food. But it's kind of, like we've talked about, ag's like reserve champion day for food consumption. And I know, Kurt, you did a really cool article in Nebraska talking about the food consumption for Husker games, right?
Yeah, I actually got to interview the concession manager for Memorial Stadium, which is home of the Cornhusker football team. And I just wanted, like their stats of what it holds about 82,000, typically on a home game. And it, wouldn't be the same as the Super Bowl, but it give us some kind of relevance and some close stats, I guess. And they went through, like in a typical day, they would go through almost 22,000 slices of pizza at the game, like 14,000 hot dogs, 600 pounds of raw popcorn, 30 gallons of ice cream, 560 pounds of hamburger, which I thought it would be higher on the hamburger, but I guess, you're just selling quarter pounders. So I suppose it goes a long way. And then the one that none of you would understand, but that is the about almost 14,000 runzas, which is a very Nebraska thing at these Husker games. But I'm guessing that the numbers on, at least like on pizza, hot dogs, and burgers and stuff, is going to be pretty close to the Super Bowl, to people who actually can afford to and actually go to the game in New Orleans. So that, I thought, that's kind of interesting, but it's phenomenal when you think about the amount of food that gets consumed.
I know. Since you talked about money a little bit, Kurt, the Super Bowl, of course, costs a lot from the food there, or the tickets, or the sports betting. And Whitney, talk a little bit about some of the cotton that, like the uses, because I know one of the stats that I found is dollar bills in America are made from primarily cotton. And I did not know that. So I'm always learning these little fun facts about rice and cotton.
Well, cotton, I mean, it's the most sustainable fiber you can possibly put on your body. It is not only sustainable, but it's also, biodegradable. Cotton is amazing. In fact, like I told you, I learned more about that when I worked for Bill. One of my favorite studies he would do was cover crop and show how it is sustainably made. And cotton is an amazing and resilient crop. Another fun fact, though, is that cotton seed that's inside that cotton can be taken and used for dairy feed, and it increases butter fat. So, or shown to increase butter fat. So, you'll have your dairy farmers buy cottonseed to feed those cattle to make that ice cream and the cheese on the top of that pizza. It's pretty amazing to see how it all comes together. So, it doesn't just clothe your body in a sustainable fashion, it can also feed your belly.
So in
Cotton's a great crop.
Arkansas, is Arkansas a big cotton state? What parts of your state grow the most cotton in your area?
In my area, particularly, we have some cotton, but not as much. Although Arkansas in 2024 was number 3 in cotton, upland cotton. So, number 3 in the nation. We're number 1 in the nation in rice, number 3 in broilers, and number 3 in cotton production. Also, number 3 in cottonseed. We have some cotton here, but most of it's down south from me. So I'm in northeast Arkansas. You get kind of central and southeast part of the state. You get more cotton ground. But also, though, when you go over toward Memphis, there's tons of cotton there. Tons of cotton. It just depends on the ground. It depends on the soil. Cotton doesn't like wet feet. So, like I told you, my county is number 1 in rice because we have a lot of heavy clay soils here, or heavy soils, not necessarily the best for cotton. So it wants sandier ground, and that's where you see our cotton ground is over toward Memphis and down south of me.
Sarah, we talked about this earlier. I was kind of wondering, where does North Dakota rank as far as rice and cotton? I was just curious.
I don't even know if they published the stats because, like we talked about, Whitney, we've talked about in the last few episodes, we've talked with some of our southern editors. I'm going to try to grow cotton in my backyard garden this summer and see what happens because Kurt had said he's never heard of cotton grown north of Nebraska and on the Nebraska Kansas border. And I want to try it. I have raised garden beds. I'm going to give it a shot. We're going to see what happens.
It's cotton is a really cool plant. It's very cool to see it grow. And some cotton though is meant to be shorter and some is taller. It depends on where you plant it, and depends on the season and the location, what kind of variety that you want. Louisiana wants a different variety than what we want up here. It's very interesting to learn that about cotton.
There you go, Sarah. Now you know how to grow it in your garden anyway. So I think we should have like video of this and see the progression through the season in your garden
I
in
want to
North
see it.
Dakota. Yeah.
We'll have to see how good it grows. I know I had some 25-foot pumpkin vines last fall, so I know the soil should be good, but maybe, I got to do some more research. Maybe I'll see what I can find out. I know I looked up cotton seeds already, and I feel like I have a green thumb and I garden enough. We'll give it a shot, and Whitney will have to send updates.
Please do.
Updates your way.
Or ask for advice. Maybe that's what we ought to do. Well, Whitney, did you have anything else that you wanted to share with us, before we sign off here? We sure have appreciated visiting with you and learning a little bit more about some of the southern crops, how winter has maybe dipped into your neck of the woods, and a little bit about your favorite stories. So just wondering if you had anything else you wanted to share with our listeners.
Yeah, just we say that word sustainable all the time, but it means a lot more than just sustainable, and I think sometimes it's hard to define. So I encourage all of our farmers to plant the cover crops and be the best conservationists they can possibly be, which actually you don't even have to tell them that. Our farmers are the best conservationists on the planet. They know exactly how to take care of the land. So just verify that. And if there's any money on the table to take, climate smart or whatever, don't miss that opportunity. Because we're in a pinch this year going into 2025, and we're not in a place where we can leave money on the table.
Absolutely, Whitney, and thank you for joining us today. And Kurt, I think that about wraps up this Shop Talk episode of FP Next, powered by John Deere.
Yes, we want to thank Whitney for joining us today. And to our listeners, we want to thank you for tuning in to this season of FP Next, allowing us into your tractor cab, your truck, on your farm, in your shop, and in your fields. We want to take a moment to share a thank you to John Deere for powering FP Next and allowing us to bring you more of these episodes and topics to farmers and ranchers across the nation. A special thank you goes out to our sales, digital, production, and marketing team members who put in a lot of work with us. And if you want to be sure not to miss any top stories, sign up for our Farm Progress Text Blasts, which bring the hot stories right to your inbox.
You can sign up for those text alerts by texting FARM, FARM, to 20505. Be sure to follow Farm Progress on social media to stay up to date with ag news and more. And check out the digital edition of your regional publication, including Delta Farm Press, at farmprogress.com. Stay tuned for our next episode. We'll keep up our football theme and discuss which NFL players, past and present, come from a farm background or who are now involved in production agriculture.
Yeah, you might be surprised at some of those names that we talk about, and we're excited to keep up on these fun and timely topics throughout this season.
You can follow along with FP Next by listening and subscribing on your favorite podcast platform, or YouTube, or Farm Progress Online, and be sure to leave us a review if you enjoy the show.
Sarah always says 5 stars or nothing.
Absolutely, and remember, if it's agriculture, your friends at Farm Progress have you covered. Here's wishing you high yields and good weather. We'll see you next time.